The old photograph lay on Diana's desk, its edges worn and colors fading into sepia tones that seemed to belong to another lifetime. A young couple smiled from within the frame. Her brother Michael and his wife Sarah, their backpacks strapped to their shoulders, standing at the entrance of Yellowstone National Park. Behind them, a sign welcomed visitors to America's oldest national park, promising adventure and natural wonder. It was the last photo ever taken of them. Diana ran her finger across the glass, tracing the outline of her brother's face. 27 years had passed since that summer of 1987, when Michael and Sarah Lawson disappeared without a trace during what was supposed to be a week-long camping trip in the park's backcountry. Today marked the anniversary of when they were reported missing, and every year on this date, Diana felt the familiar weight of unresolved grief settle over her like a heavy blanket. Outside her window, the Montana rain tapped gently against the glass, a soft rhythm that seemed to echo the persistent questions that had haunted her for nearly 3 decades. What happened to them? How could 2 experienced hikers simply vanish in a park frequented by thousands of visitors? The official search had been extensive. Park rangers, volunteers, helicopters scanning the vast wilderness. But not a single clue emerged. No backpacks, no camping equipment, no bodies. It was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed them whole. Diana sipped her tea, now grown cold, and opened the worn manila folder she kept in her desk drawer. Inside were newspaper clippings, letters, and the official report from the National Park Service, which concluded with the painful phrase, "presumed dead due to exposure or wildlife encounter." The case had gone cold within months, becoming just another tragedy in the park's long history of accidents and misadventures. "They deserve better than this," Diana whispered to the empty room. "Someone must know something." Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was Thomas Reed, her brother's best friend, and the last person to hear from Michael before the disappearance. "I was just thinking about you," Diana said, her voice softening. "Today's the day." "That's why I'm calling," Thomas replied, his voice carrying an unusual edge of excitement. "Diana, I found something that doesn't make sense." Her heart quickened. "What do you mean?" "I've been going through old boxes in my attic. I found a map that Michael sent me just before their trip. He'd marked several locations on it, places they planned to visit. But here's the thing, one of those locations wasn't on any official Yellowstone trail. It was miles from where the search teams looked." Diana's hand tightened around the phone. "After all this time, why didn't you find this before?" "The map was tucked inside a book he'd lent me. I never opened it until now. Diana, this could change everything we thought we knew about where they went." Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof as Diana processed what this might mean. For years, she'd tried to accept the official explanation, tried to move forward with her life while carrying the hollow space her brother's absence had left. But deep down, she'd never believed the simple explanation that they'd gotten lost or fallen victim to the wilderness. "There's something else," Thomas continued, his voice dropping. "I called an old ranger I know who still works at Yellowstone, mentioned the location to him. He got real quiet, Diana. Said that area was temporarily closed to the public back in '87 for what they called environmental assessment, but he couldn't find any record of what they were actually doing there." A chill ran through Diana that had nothing to do with the weather. "You think something happened? Something they covered up?" "I don't know. But I'm driving down to Yellowstone tomorrow. I need to see this place for myself." Diana stood up, decision made before she even realized it. "I'm coming with you." "Diana, it's probably nothing. Just an old man grasping at straws because he misses his friend." "It's the first new information in 27 years, Thomas. I need to see it too." After she hung up, Diana returned to the photograph, studying her brother's face. Michael had been an environmental science professor, passionate about conservation and wildly in love with Sarah, a wildlife photographer he'd met during a university expedition. Their shared love of nature had brought them together and perhaps led them to their end. Or had it? Diana packed a small suitcase, moving with purpose for the first time in years. She'd spent too long accepting a truth that had never felt right. Tomorrow, she would drive to Yellowstone and face whatever waited there. Answers, disappointment, or something else entirely. As she prepared to leave, she glanced one last time at the photo of Michael and Sarah, their faces forever frozen in that moment of joy and anticipation. "I'm going to find out what happened to you," she promised them, "whatever it takes." That night, Diana dreamed of Yellowstone, not as the idyllic wilderness from vacation brochures, but as a place of shadows and secrets, where the earth concealed more than it revealed, and where, somewhere beneath the surface of official reports and faded memories, the truth about her brother and his wife had been waiting for 27 years to be discovered. The drive to Yellowstone took Diana and Thomas 8 hours, their conversation flowing between memories of Michael and Sarah and long stretches of contemplative silence. As they passed through the iconic stone archway at the park's north entrance, Diana felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. This place, with its steaming geysers and sweeping valleys, had taken her brother from her, or at least that was what she'd believed for over 2 decades. "The area we're looking for is in the northeast section," Thomas said, pointing to the faded map spread across his knees. "It's remote, about 3 miles off any marked trail. Michael had circled it twice and written anomaly next to it." "What kind of anomaly would interest them enough to go off trail?" Diana asked, her eyes fixed on the winding road ahead. Michael was studying thermal patterns in the park's ecosystem. If he found something unusual, some thermal activity that didn't match existing records, he would have wanted to investigate it. They parked at a trailhead where few tourists ventured and began their hike. The summer sun beat down through the pine canopy, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. Diana felt oddly disconnected from the beauty around her, as if she were moving through a place both familiar and utterly foreign. After 2 hours of hiking, they veered off the marked trail, using Thomas's GPS to navigate toward the location Michael had marked. The terrain grew rougher, the forest denser. "This doesn't make sense," Thomas said, stopping to catch his breath. "This area isn't particularly special geologically. Nothing here would have caught Michael's interest professionally." "Unless it wasn't about science," Diana replied quietly. "Unless they found something else." As they pushed deeper into the unmarked wilderness, Diana noticed subtle changes in their surroundings. The vegetation seemed different, more uniform, as if it had all grown back at the same time. Thomas noticed it too. "These trees," he said, placing his hand against a pine trunk. "They're all roughly the same age, 30 years, maybe less. Is that unusual? In a natural forest? Yes. This looks like regrowth after a clearing. A clearing that would have happened around 1987. They pressed on until they reached a small valley nestled between 2 hills. From the surface, it appeared unremarkable, a meadow dotted with wildflowers surrounded by the younger pines they'd observed. Thomas consulted the map again. "This is it. This is where Michael marked the anomaly." Diana scanned the peaceful scene before them, disappointment beginning to settle in. What had she expected? Some obvious sign of what had happened to her brother and his wife, preserved perfectly for nearly 3 decades. "Let's look around," she said, refusing to give up after coming this far. They separated, methodically searching the area. Diana walked the perimeter, looking for anything unnatural or out of place. The sun had begun its descent toward the western mountains when she heard Thomas call out, "Diana, over here!" She rushed to where he stood at the meadow's edge. He was crouched beside what looked like a metal handle, protruding from the ground, almost entirely concealed by vegetation. "What is it?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "I'm not sure. Help me." Together, they cleared away the growth. What emerged was unmistakably man-made, a metal trapdoor set into the earth, its surface rusted and weathered by decades of exposure. A government padlock secured it shut, but the lock had long since corroded. Diana's heart pounded as Thomas worked to break the degraded lock. When it finally gave way with a brittle snap, they exchanged a look that contained equal parts fear and determination. "Whatever we find," Thomas said, We document everything, for Michael and Sarah. He pulled the heavy door open to reveal a set of concrete stairs descending into darkness. The air that rose from the opening was cool and stale, carrying the scent of metal and abandonment. Thomas produced a flashlight from his backpack, its beam cutting through the gloom, to reveal a corridor at the bottom of the stairs. Without hesitation, Diana started down, each step taking her closer to answers she'd waited 27 years to find. The underground facility was small, but clearly built with purpose, a series of 3 rooms with reinforced walls and what had once been state-of-the-art equipment, now obsolete and dust-covered. The first room contained monitoring stations with long dead screens. The second held what appeared to be storage lockers, most empty but some still containing sealed containers marked with government classifications. "This is a research station," Thomas whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space, but not the kind the Park Service would build. In the third and largest room, they found something that made Diana's blood run cold. A large metal cage, its door hanging open, occupying the center of the space. Around it were more monitoring equipment, cameras, and what looked like scientific instruments. "What were they doing here?" Diana asked, her voice barely audible. Thomas was examining a faded ledger left on a desk. "This is a government facility, but it's not National Park Service. These are Department of Defense markers." The implications hung in the air between them. What would the military be doing with a secret underground facility in the middle of Yellowstone National Park? And what connection did it have to Michael and Sarah's disappearance? As Diana moved around the cage, her flashlight beam caught something small and metallic on the floor beneath a fallen shelf. She bent down and picked it up, her hands trembling. It was a camera, an old 35mm model, its once black surface now grey with dust. A camera exactly like the one Sarah had carried everywhere. "Thomas," she called, her voice breaking, "look at this." He crossed the room and took the camera from her shaking hands. "It's Sarah's. I recognize the scratch on the lens cap. She did that on a trip to Glacier the year before they disappeared." "They were here," Diana whispered, the reality of it washing over her in waves. "They found this place." Thomas carefully opened the back of the camera. Inside, miraculously preserved, was a roll of film, partially exposed. "We need to get this developed," he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion, "and we need to find out what this facility was." As they climbed back up into the fading daylight, Diana felt a strange sense of vindication mixed with growing dread. For years, she'd been told to accept that her brother and his wife had been victims of nature's indifference. A wrong turn, a sudden storm, a tragic accident. But this underground room, with its cage and monitors, told a very different story. "We need to be careful," Thomas said as they made their way back toward the trail. "If someone went to this much trouble to hide whatever happened here, they might not want it found after all this time." Diana clutched the camera to her chest, this tangible connection to Sarah and, by extension, to Michael. "I don't care how dangerous it is. This is the closest I've been to them in 27 years. Indeed, as the sun set over Yellowstone's ancient forests, Diana and Thomas began the long hike back, carrying with them physical proof that the official story of Michael and Sarah Lawson's disappearance had been, at best, incomplete, and at worst, a deliberate cover-up of something far more sinister than a wilderness tragedy. The small photography shop in Bozeman was owned by an elderly man named Harold, who still specialized in developing film from older cameras. When Diana and Thomas arrived with Sarah's camera the following morning, Harold's eyes lit up at the sight of the vintage 35mm. "Don't see many of these anymore," he said, carefully extracting the film. "This has been in here a long time. I'll do my best, but no promises." "How long will it take?" Diana asked, unable to mask the urgency in her voice. Harold studied her face, seeming to sense the importance of what he held in his hands. "For you, I'll do it today. Come back in 3 hours." "Learny?" They spent those hours in a nearby cafe. Thomas making calls to old colleagues who might have information about government research facilities, while Diana searched online for any records of unusual activities in Yellowstone during the late 1980s. "Listen to this," she said, turning her laptop toward Thomas. "In 1986, there was a series of unusual animal disappearances reported in the northeast section of the park. The official explanation was predator activity, but some local environmental groups claimed the numbers were too high and the pattern too unusual. The same area where Michael marked his map," Thomas noted, leaning closer to read. "And look, there was a small mention in a local paper about increased government presence in the park for what they called wildlife management studies. It stopped appearing in reports after 1989. Thomas set down his phone. "I just got off the call with a friend who worked in environmental protection during that period. He said there were rumors about a classified project studying predator control methods, ways to protect livestock on lands adjacent to national parks without culling wolf populations." "Predator control," Diana repeated, the words leaving a bitter taste. "What does that have to do with an underground facility with a cage?" When they returned to Harold's shop, the old photographer was waiting for them with an envelope of prints and a troubled expression. "I developed what I could," he said quietly. "Some were too degraded, but most came out clear enough. I don't know what you folks are involved in, but these pictures—" He shook his head. "Just be careful." Diana's hands trembled as she opened the envelope once they were back in the car. The first few photos were typical tourist shots, Michael and Sarah at various Yellowstone landmarks, smiling, unaware of what awaited them. Then came images that made Diana's breath catch, detailed shots of what appeared to be a metal trap, partially hidden in underbrush, large enough to capture a wolf or bear. "Michael was documenting illegal traps," Thomas said, examining the photos. "That's what brought them to that area in the first place." But the next series of images told a different story. Shot in rapid succession, they showed men in unmarked uniforms discovering Michael and Sarah, confrontation evident in their postures. The final developed photo showed the entrance to what they now recognized as the underground facility, its trapdoor open, a uniformed man gesturing with what appeared to be a weapon. "They were taken," Diana whispered, the reality of it crushing against her chest. "Not lost, not killed by wildlife. Taken." Thomas studied the last photo closely. "There's a marking on that man's uniform. It's blurry, but I think it's DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. We need to find out who was in charge of this project," Diana said, a new determination hardening her voice. "And we need to know what happened after these photos were taken." Armed with the photographic evidence, they drove to the regional FBI office in Bozeman. The initial skepticism of the agents dissolved when they saw the photos and heard the details of the underground facility. Within hours, Diana and Thomas found themselves in a conference room with Agent Lawford, a serious woman with prematurely grey hair who specialized in cold cases. "What you've discovered may connect to something we've been piecing together for years," Lawford told them, spreading out a file on the table. "Between 1985 and 1990, there was a classified DARPA initiative called Project Cerberus. Officially, it was researching wildlife deterrent systems using behavioral modification." "Behavioral modification?" Thomas asked. "They were developing what they called a humane trap, a system that would capture predators like wolves or bears, subject them to conditioning that would make them avoid human settlements, then release them. The project was controversial even within the agency and was shut down after a series of incidents." Diana leaned forward. "What kind of incidents?" Agent Lawford hesitated before continuing. "There are indications that the project expanded beyond its original parameters. Some researchers believed the technology could have applications for human behavioral modification. The project records from this period are heavily redacted, but there are references to unauthorized human exposure and containment protocols. The implication hung in the air, like a physical presence. "Are you saying my brother and his wife were used as test subjects?" Diana asked, her voice barely controlled. "I'm saying it's a possibility we need to investigate," Lawford replied carefully. "If they discovered this facility and documented illegal activity, they posed a security risk to a classified project. What happened next would depend on who was running the operation and how far they were willing to go to protect it." Over the next week, the FBI investigation moved with surprising speed, fueled by the physical evidence Diana and Thomas had discovered and perhaps by the agency's desire to resolve a case that implicated government misconduct. They interviewed former DARPA employees, park rangers from the period, and even tracked down one of the men identifiable in Sarah's photographs, now an elderly retiree living in Florida. It was this man, William Greaves, former security officer for Project Cerberus, who finally provided the missing pieces. "I've been waiting for this day," he told Diana when they met in the presence of FBI agents. "Carrying this for too long." Though, according to Greaves, Michael and Sarah had indeed stumbled upon one of the project's trap testing sites. When they began photographing it, they were intercepted and brought to the facility for questioning. What was supposed to be a temporary detention spiraled when the project director, a man named Lawrence Wayland, discovered Michael's environmental science background and Sarah's photography skills. "Wayland saw an opportunity," Greaves explained, his voice heavy with regret. "The project needed documentation, both scientific and visual. He offered them a deal: work with the project for 6 months, sign non-disclosure agreements, and walk away with enough money to fund their own environmental research for years." "Did they agree?" Diana asked, though she already knew her brother well enough to guess the answer. "Initially, no, but then they saw what was happening in that facility. The project wasn't just about wildlife. Wayland had gone rogue, testing his behavioral technologies on homeless people brought in under the guise of paid medical studies. Your brother and his wife threatened to expose everything." Diana closed her eyes, pain and pride washing through her in equal measure. That sounded exactly like Michael, unwilling to stay silent in the face of injustice, regardless of the risk. "What happened to them?" she asked, opening her eyes to face whatever truth came next. "Wayland panicked. Ordered them to be held in the facility. I don't know all the details. I was stationed outside, but there was some kind of struggle. A fire broke out in the lab area." Greaves paused, his eyes fixed on some distant point. "The official report says they died in that fire, along with 2 project scientists. The facility was closed, the project shut down, and buried in classification." "But you don't believe that's what happened?" Agent Lawford pressed. Greaves shifted uncomfortably. "The night of the fire, I was on perimeter duty. I saw someone, a woman I'm almost certain was Sarah Lawson, running into the forest. I was under orders not to engage, just report. By the time backup arrived, there was no trace of her." Diana's heart seemed to stop. "You're saying Sarah might have escaped? What about Michael?" "I never saw him, but the body count reported from the fire never matched the personnel records. One body was never conclusively identified." BIM. In the days that followed, the FBI expanded their investigation, now treating it as a potential case of criminal misconduct by government officials, false reporting, and possibly even murder. The underground facility was fully excavated, yielding charred remnants that confirmed Greaves's story about a fire, and human remains that would finally be properly analyzed. 6 weeks after their discovery of the underground facility, Diana received a call from Agent Lawford. "We found her," the agent said without preamble. "Sarah Lawson is alive." The reunion took place in a small safe house in Montana. Sarah, now going by Susan Lambert, had been living in Canada for 26 years, working as a wildlife rehabilitation specialist in remote British Columbia. She'd built a quiet life, never using her real name, never contacting family, carrying the weight of what had happened along with the burden of her escape. When Diana entered the room, she barely recognized the woman sitting there, hair now grey, face lined with years of solitude and hidden grief, but the eyes were unmistakably Sarah's, holding the same gentle intensity Diana remembered. "I'm so sorry," were Sarah's first words, her voice breaking as Diana embraced her. I tried to save him. I tried everything. Slowly, painfully, Sarah shared the full story. The fire had been set deliberately, not by Wayland, but by Michael himself, as a diversion to allow Sarah to escape and expose what was happening. Michael had planned to follow, but in the chaos, Wayland had shot him. Sarah had seen him fall, but couldn't reach him through the flames. His last words to me were, "Tell the truth," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. But when I made it to town, no one believed me. A woman in shock, making wild accusations about secret government experiments. They thought I was delusional. When I saw a newspaper report that we'd both died in a hiking accident, I realized how deep the cover-up went. I was afraid. Afraid they'd find me and silence me too. So you ran, Diana said gently, holding Sarah's trembling hands. I convinced myself it was what Michael would have wanted, for me to survive, to live the kind of life we'd dreamed of, working with wildlife, protecting nature. But not a day has passed that I haven't thought of him, of you, of the truth we never told. 3 months later, Lawrence Wayland stood trial for the murder of Michael Lawson and the subsequent cover-up. Sarah testified, her voice growing stronger as she finally fulfilled the promise she'd made to her husband 27 years before. Diana sat in the courtroom each day, watching justice slowly, imperfectly unfold. On the anniversary of their discovery of the underground facility, Diana and Sarah returned to Yellowstone. The trap was long gone, the facility dismantled during the FBI investigation. In its place, they left a small memorial stone for Michael, nestled among the wildflowers. He would have liked this spot, Sarah said softly, placing her hand on the stone. He always said truth finds its way to the surface, like a seedling pushing through soil. Diana nodded, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded her for nearly 3 decades. It just needs someone to keep looking for it. As they walked back toward the marked trail, Diana glanced over her shoulder at the small meadow, now returned to its natural state. The truth had finally emerged from its long burial, not complete, not perfect, but enough to begin healing wounds that time alone had never managed to close. "Where will you go now?" Diana asked as they reached the trailhead. Sarah looked out across the vast, ancient landscape of Yellowstone. "I think it's time to come home, to reclaim my name, to live in the light again." The setting sun bathed the park in golden light as they made their way back, 2 women carrying a truth that had waited patiently beneath the earth for 27 years to be discovered, just like the trap that had started it all. If you found this story moving, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life mysteries and emotional journeys. There's another video appearing on your screen right now that I think you'll find fascinating. Remember, sometimes the most important truths are the ones we have to dig for, the ones that wait years, even decades, for someone brave enough to uncover them.